Hello, everybody. James here. I can't even introduce my next guest because we've been chatting for an hour before about everything, putting the world to rights. I believe. I don't know if do you have that same saying?
Yeah. I think we fixed everything at least for this cup of coffee. But we're
How are you this morning? I don't think I asked you, did I?
yeah. What's that?
I didn't even ask you how you were. How rude of me.
Oh no. Yeah. You did when we first came in. Before we started gabbing. It's getting colder here in the Pittsburgh area and Charleston area. But it's December in the Pittsburgh Charleston area. So, but other than like the little aches and pains that come from the obvious career that I've had, everything's good in life. I got two good, healthy boys, and I still live a fairly interesting life, and I opened my eyes this morning. So it's every day above ground's a good day to me, bud.
There you go. That's quite the way to look at it. I'm trying to think what we talked about. We talked about conspiracy theories. We talked about the environment. We talked about politics quite a lot. We talked about Mark Madden and his lawsuit that you never heard of from 1998.
So medicine.
Yeah, we talked a lot about medicine. By the way, I only found this out recently, so people at home, if you're interested in a good read, Mark Madden versus Titan Sports 1998. It was a lawsuit that I think Mark lost, but it's about journalistic integrity, which was interesting.
For everybody out there listening, James had just told me about this case. I've known Mark Madden since 87, 8. I had never heard of this case until then. So when I get off, I'm going to go back and research it myself.
Definitely. I promise you it'll be interesting. This is in the era of the 1-900 Mean Gene phone numbers. And I think I was asking about a claim about Ricky Steamboat, who may have been coming. Someone made it up in 95 that he may have been coming back. And it was totally made up, essentially.
Yeah. Well, again, the segue to that, lead into that was that we were talking about in the news. We keep hearing this phrase: an anonymous source, someone close to the president, blah 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 blah. And here in America, I can't speak for England or anywhere else, but here in America, we get hammered by that all day long. Every story is an anonymous source or whatever. And although, Watergate was broken because of anonymous sources, Deep Throat, but so there is a journalistic reason for it. But today, I think a lot of people, and I can't say who or what or when, are taking liberties with that. And so, for everybody out there that's a lot smarter than I am, beware of what you're listening to. Like I tell my kids, I told you a second ago, don't believe anything James tells you or I tell you. Go out and research it, dig into it, validate it or invalidate it. And for those people you invalidated on, say to them, I'm not going to pay much attention to you anymore.
Definitely don't believe anything I say anyway. We have questions from the fans, far too many to ask for one episode or 2 episodes or even 5 episodes, but I've picked some of the best for you, and I'm actually going to open with this one. And it's a cheeky one, Shane. And because I actually know the story behind it, but I just like the way that the question asked it. And Little Jimmy asks, is it true that Conrad Thompson paid you $1,500 to hang out with him?
Yes. That was set up through Steve O'Neill, who I was working with at the time on Extreme Rising. And we went down, and he was very gracious. A gigantic home overlooking this in Huntsville, Alabama, is built like sort of a bowl, and overlooking that, and a very eclectic taste. There was a suit of armor, and looked like a really cool bachelor pad at the time. And what was interesting about that conversation, when we went, it was several hours, 5-6 hours spent. Steve O'Neill and I spent at his house. I don't go to anybody's home unless I'm with somebody. So, everybody's great, but if somebody has ill intent, you could end up in jail over stuff like that. So, but I remember that day, he it's sort of ironic who he is today, because he had gone on and on about Flair. I guess, I can't remember, it was a ring or it was cufflinks. He bought him like a $2,000 or $3,000 ring or a set of cufflinks, one of the two. And a few days later saw them online, on eBay or something. And he was really, taken back by that. And I said, well, he is who he is, right? It's so yeah. But we went and hung out, and the odd thing was then at the, I guess it was called All In, maybe the Las Vegas show and convention. I was sitting there talking to an old friend from WCW, and he walked by with two older people, and he said hello to the guy I was talking to. I mean, as close as this camera is to me, and kept walking. I said, "Hey, Conrad, you're not going to say hello?" And he went, "Oh, hi," and he kept walking. The two people with him were his parents. He introduced to my friend, our mutual friend, and that was weird because last time I was around him, like he had a gazillion questions for me, right? And so who knows, what goes on in people's heads.
Was it an auction? I've got it in my mind that it was like some sort of auction. He won it, and the prize was to win you basically for a few hours.
That part, Steve O'Neill handled all that. All I knew is he had set up an appointment for us to fly down and to go to his house for several hours. I mean, I can't remember specifically how long, but it was longer than an hour or two.
Yeah. There's also a section I'm calling the low-hanging fruit section, which is going to be a couple of Ric Flair questions. We'll get to that in a little bit. The next question, Jack O'Connor. Top 3 wrestlers Shane thought would become breakout stars, but never quite made it to the main event.
Yeah, it always perplexes me. There's so many ingredients that go into this. Being just a good athlete or a great athlete isn't enough. There was plenty of those guys. In fact, Al Perez.
Yeah.
I just ran into him for the first time in decades. Last WrestleCade, not this one, the one prior. And I'm looking down and I keep looking at him. It's like a brain fart, right? I know this person. Still looks great, still great shape. And at a certain point, we both sort of like see each other. And as soon as he put his hand up, like, Al Perez, so I went over, we said hello, hugged, caught up. And, he was one of those guys. He had the body, he had there's like Tom Zank, him. There's some of the guys that get into our business, Jimmy Powers, that were so good looking, they look like they should be in movies or something, right? I mean, just had those model looks. Al was one of those guys and had the body, great athlete. By all definitions, should have been a major star in the industry, right? And his explanation, I believe, was that he had allotted so much time. If I don't make it by this time, then I'm moving on, which is what he pretty much did. And he's done quite well for himself. But I've seen people that had far more talent than me, better bodies, faster, not many better looking. Mm-hmm. And I've seen them come and go, right? And I don't know what the reasoning is, but there's some intangible in there and a lot of luck, right? Like I think in anything in entertainment, right place, right time type of thing. But yeah, it's one of those things that perplexes us in the industry. You see somebody and think this guy's got star written all, or this girl, when I say the boys, I mean everybody. They have it written all over them, and then they just sort of disappear. And who knows? With
the WWF, I believe Al was in there, either late 80s or maybe even when you were there, like 1990, 1991, and he went in there, looked great, and don't even think he was used on TV.
Yes, so, and we still see that continue today, right? Yeah. With Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler and on. There's a long litany of those type of wrestlers that go there through the revolving door.
Yeah. One more thing is, I believe that wasn't he a fairly tough guy? For some reason, in the back of my head, there's some sort of fight between maybe even him and Ric Flair. This is totally off the top of my head, but I don't know if there was any stories about that you could tell.
That part I didn't know. When you're around our business and around, a lot of tough guys like we are all the time, you come to realize like who the real tough guys are and aren't. I can't say I've ever seen Al in a fight, but you could tell he could handle himself. He's not in any way a jerk, my experience with Al was always just a good guy. But yeah, there's a lot of the guys surprise you, like Dick Slater, right? Like you look at him, he's just sort of a disarming older guy, and salty as they come. But back then they were all salty. I mean, the biggest chump of them all was a tough guy. So but yeah, Al could certainly handle himself and still looks great. And one of those guys that I go, why didn't he make it? Because he had it all.
I hope that answered your question for you, Jack O'Connor. Right, let me see. Now, this is going to be a bit scattergun, of course, because the people's questions are not going to flow quite as well. But we're going to go straight to WCW now. And someone has asked, I've not got the name, why was Paul Heyman fired from WCW?
I don't know specifically, but I do recall at that time there was a lot of like things swirling around Paul. I don't think it was any mystery that Paul was aspiring to higher up, more than just talent. And as political as the industry is, but certainly was then, those politicians above would see that kid climbing the ladder, and they would decide either, he's somebody wanted to bring into the fold or somebody wanted to shove back down. But I remember one incident, and I can't recall where it was, but it was an outdoor show in like a baseball, like a semi-pro baseball team. And for some reason, I don't know the reason, the Steiners, Scott and Rick, were chasing him. And I headed them off so the Steiners could get him. And they took his shoes for some reason and never gave them back. But when you hear, Scotty and especially Ricky called the Gremlin, that's why they were doing stuff like that. But my guess would be that he was aspiring to get up that ladder, and obviously somebody up at the top didn't want that.
My understanding was, I don't know if this was like the last straw, but it was something to do with cashing in of flight tickets or withholding them.
I remember the story. I didn't know it was Paul. Yeah, there were some people that supposedly were doing that, and then like missing the shows and things. And back then you could take the ticket to, and it had a cash value, and you can't do it now. It just gets put back on the card or whatever. But yeah, and I didn't know Paul was involved in that, but I do remember hearing the story about that. Yes, they would give you at the beginning of the month, you'd get your booking sheet and literally a stack of plane tickets, and it was your responsibility. Those things were like gold, right? If you lost it, you had to pay to get there. So I always kept mine in one of those leather bank envelopes, zippered bank envelopes, and always had them in a safe place, because if you lost them, boy, if you lost a month worth of tickets, you're gonna have a bad year.
Was Paul? I mean, we know all the stories about ECW and everything, but was Paul always the backstage manipulator worker in WCW as well? Like always suspicious of everybody or trying to conjure up a story? I don't know.
Yeah, I think Paul, anybody in our industry, once you become aware, you start to pay real close attention in the back, the politics of the place. And I think, that, Paul certainly is intelligent enough to have done that. My recollections of Paul in the dressing room were just, really sort of subdued, and which would be in line with somebody just sitting and watching and listening. But yeah, I don't recall the Paul Heyman that I would come to know in ECW seeing any vestiges of that in WCW or before.
Next question then. Chris Brooker, he says, I've been watching a lot of WCW in 1992 and 1993 as of late. Really enjoyed Shane's team with Ricky Steamboat. How did that come about, and any memories that stand out? Loved the Starrcade match with Pillman and Wyndham, in particular. Overlooked belter.
Yeah, great question. And again, perfect timing, because if for anybody out there that didn't get a chance to watch the Ricky Steamboat final match, I would highly encourage you to go watch, pull it up and watch it, because the entire card was fantastic. It really was a good show. And for me, just seeing Ricky come through that curtain, it was like a time machine, And when he got into the ring, I think all of us were a bit trepidatious. He hadn't been in the ring for a long time, taking bumps and things. And, so there was a part of me that was very concerned for my friend. But I knew he would, smart enough to do the right thing. And just watching him sell, I felt myself sucked right back to that time frame. Like it was, here I am on the apron again, or close to the ring in this case, watching him and just being sucked in, just mesmerizing. But
were you at the show? Were you actually physically at the show?
I did the color commentary.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, Joe Dombrowski and I. And I hadn't done it for a while, but we did an okay job. Yeah. But I said to Ricky prior to the show, I said, when the roof's going to blow off the place, right? He goes, no, when? I said, the first Ricky Steamboat arm drag, the place is going to go crazy. He said, you think? I went, yeah, I think. And sure enough, when it did, so if you're watching the show, if there's a camera angle, you can see me. The ring's to my, sort of like in front of me, but like slightly to my right. So I'm watching the action here. And as soon as the arm drag hits, I go like this to see the crowd. And place blows up, So it's just a thing of beauty. And a little side note, I tried like hell to learn that. And he tried like hell to teach me. And I just couldn't get it. I mean, it's so eloquent the way when it's executed. But the show itself was fantastic. Memories of Ricky Steamboat, how it came about was I had, prior to that, 92, I was teaching special ed at the time in Industry, Pennsylvania. And not Shawn Michaels, these brain farts with names anymore. Marty Jannetty had called me up and said he had spoken to Kip Fry. They wanted to bring us in as the new Rockers because we had that brief period where we had done the Rockers thing in WWF when Shawn was hurt at $5,000 a week. So I put my notice in for teaching. I'm quitting this job. You can't go back and say, hey, I was just playing. I'll keep my job. So not long before we were supposed to go in, there's that party at Marty's house where a young woman ends up dead. And
whoa, hang on. I don't know the story here. What's the...
Yeah. I think, as I remember the story, it wasn't like she was killed or anything. I think she just overdosed or something, but there's a woman dead in his house. And Kip Fry, being an attorney, sort of went, yeah, we ain't touching this. And I called him. I said, Kip, I've quit my job, and for this, and I didn't have a dead lady in my house, so they brought me in, but there was the $5,000 wasn't guaranteed now because that was for something different. So Bill, before I went in, Kip had been fired and Bill Watts was brought in. And I had worked for Bill previously in the UWF. He was well aware of who I was and knowledgeable of my skills. And he pulled me aside and said, Shane, I need a favor from you. They didn't give me a full budget and Kip had spent the entire quarter. So he wanted me to work for $300 a night. And he was the one that conjured this idea of me and Ricky Steamboat. So I thought in my head, I'll gladly work for $300 a night to work with Ricky Steamboat, and the promise was next quarter we'll bring you up to speed. Well, the next quarter he came to me and said, we're still having problems. I feel so bad about this, but if you give me one more quarter, and I said, I'm working now with Ricky, right? And I said, I'll give you one this quarter, but next quarter I'm done. And during that second quarter is when he crafted the Hollywood Blondes and the infamous story of me being called to the office to be put with Brian and work a program with Ricky, which I turned down. And because I wanted to stay with Ricky, and it wouldn't have worked. It was still Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. I hadn't yet been pulled up to his level or near. And but we had a great team to work with. Steve was making like 3-something, high twos, 320, like in that range. Brian was making, I think, 256, and Steamer was making like 600 or 700, which he certainly deserved. But I was one quarter of that match, and I'm being paid $300 a night. The next quarter, right before this quarter starts, Bill gets fired, and Ole Anderson gets brought in. So I tell Ole, talk to Bill, what was going on and what was promised. He tells me to come down to the office the following Monday, and I do. We go into his office, and he said, I reviewed your contract, and I don't see what you're complaining about. That's what I made when I was your age. And I went like, what? I said, like, well, so what was the hotel room then? $10 a night, $20 a night, dinner, gas.
He'd never heard of inflation then, had he?
Yeah, he missed that class. But, so eventually I was brought up, I think it was 23, maybe a week, $3,000. But it wasn't he that did it. I think it was who came in after him. But at that point, it was the politics of the place were just eating it up. And then the whole Dos Hombres thing, where I had the shoulder scoped and needed like 2 or 3 weeks. So when I heard that they were doing this, putting somebody else in there as Shane Douglas, I thought, like, boy, this is A, really unprofessional, and B, it overtly looked to me, like an overt attempt to make me look really bad, and which was in contrary to what they were telling me on the phone the whole time I was off. So I basically walked away. Steamboat, though, just I can't talk enough about the guy. I really, really look up to him and love him as a friend. because he taught me so much. But he does something at the end of that match where the Dos Hombres lose to the Blondes. He jumps up and he pulls his mask off. Well, everybody that I talked to was coming to me and said, I can't believe Steamboat did that to you. I said, did what? And he said, I took his mask off and like made sure everybody knew it was you that lost. And I went, yeah, that's not what Ricky did. I said, because Ricky doesn't think that way, right? But what was he doing? So when I finally watched it, I went, oh, he's telling the world that ain't Shane Douglas. Because why didn't Shane take his mask off? Just again, one of those guys that understood those nuances to such a deep degree that I, at that time, didn't get. But I just sent Ricky here. I'll read you the text that I sent to him. Because I mean this from the bottom of my heart. He was very much an inspiration. I mean, very much a teacher to me. That this is what I'd written to him after the. Here you go. Whoop, wrong one. So a little follow up after the match, and I said I figured I'd give you some peacetime after your awesome match last Sunday. What a time warp that was. Caught myself popping like a mark again, like I used to in our matches. But what an awesome show, top to bottom. All the kids I thought did a superlative job, and that made doing color a blast. I want to thank you for the memories and all that you taught me. You haven't lost a step, my friend. And he texted back the smiley face. That's Ricky. I mean, Ricky was ever present, and not just me. Dustin Rhodes. He became that guy in WCW that when they saw somebody that had something, let's put him with Ricky and shine him up a little bit and push him on from there. And he accepted that job incredibly loquaciously. Like I say, he was fantastic at it, and never ever negative. Every night you screw up when you're not quite sure of all the stuff you're doing. He never once said in any post-match talk, well, you really fucked up tonight, or you really screwed up tonight. He would say stuff like, hey, remember when you did the arm drag? You go, yeah. And he'd say, well, if right before that arm drag you had done this, then hit the arm drag, paused, and did that. And I'd be looking out in the night sky through my window, and I could literally, like a movie, see what he was saying, like a movie playing in the sky. I could see exactly what he was talking about. And I'd look at it and go, wow, I never thought of that. But he got you thinking in those terms, thinking outside of just heat, shine, come back, go home, to expand it out to such a much more complicated thing, but a lot more controllable. Steamboat, like I always tell fans, and I think some think I'm embellishing, if Steamboat wants just that corner to pop, he'll get just that corner to pop. To this day, I don't know how he does it, but it's like he's got them in a trance or something. It's really incredible to watch. And if you watch those old tapes, like I said in the text, of me in the match with him, I'll be on the apron, and you'll see Steamboat take a bump, and he'll go like this. He'll do the sit up, and he'll fall back down. Well, what he would do that because he didn't have long hair. He'd cover up his calling. What he's saying is, get in the match, partner, because I'm over there like this, watching like a fan, right? Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to be out here working, right? He was so in control of everything. But just a really, really good dude on top of that. So for me, just really, really fond memories. But great. I'm glad somebody asked about Steamboat.
Yeah, in fact, that wasn't the only person. GA313 asked basically the same thing. I want to apologise to you as well. I've only seen clips, and there was no commentary on any of the clips, so I didn't know that you were doing the commentary for it that night.
Yeah, no, it's and there's something that I do in the middle of it, just being me, my character. I turn my back to Joe Dombrowski, who I've known since he's probably gotten into business. He lives probably 20 miles from me. And I turned my back to him completely in character. I said, hey, can you do me a favor, Joe? Is my bald spot showing? He looks, he goes, oh, no, I don't see one. I said, because I ain't got one. So somebody after the show said, I can't believe you did that to Joe. I said, did what? He said, made fun of his bald spot. I said, he didn't have a bald spot. He goes, yeah, he does. And I look over, and sure enough, he does. I went, yeah, totally meant for other people, not for Joe, but he's a very good play-by-play guy. It makes, if you got a great play-by-play guy like I did with Joey Styles or now Joe, it makes the color job a whole lot easier. And And I've been very fortunate to work with guys like that.
Next question here, but I don't think you'll have an answer, is, were you in the company when the Sid scissors thing happened with Vader?
No, but I heard about it not long after. Friends from over there were calling me. And the whole thing just seems so surreal that it would get to that. But Sid, to me, seemed to be a guy, good guy, but he doesn't seem like he really, like most of the guys in our business love the business, right? That's why we're in it. He always seemed to be somebody that might have watched it, sort of liked it, but, would rather play softball, would rather do this, would rather do that. And, there were times where you'd see him crack, like the infamous time at the Ramada in Atlanta, where he got into it with Brian Pillman and went and pulled the squeegee out. Just things like that were, I don't want to make it sound like it's happening every day, but you were seeing like repeats of that stuff. So when I heard the story from England with the stabbing and the scissors and everything, I was floored. Like, you're going to try to, this. I mean, both him and Arn, like, how did this happen? Like, what goes on? And I think it was, again, one of those things where you're not playing it trite because anytime people's lives are involved, but trying to understand it. Arn was one of those guys, not a jerk in any way, but he'd always have those Arnisms, right? Those little quips, that just sort of zing you a little bit and you chuckle and walk away. And I think somebody like Sid, if I could play psychoanalyst for a second, and he's never been a patient of mine, but I think he had thin skin in that respect. And I think he had a lot of pressure on him, right? This big, massive guy they're expecting to become this huge star. And I don't want to dig too deep and put words or thoughts to his character. He never seemed to me as somebody that loved the wrestling business. And I think because of that, a little thin-skinned, and again, a lot of pressure, I'm sure, on him, that looking back in the thing with the squeegee, and there were other instances in the dressing rooms where people would confront him that, you get a guy that size, no matter whether they're a tough guy or not, sooner or later they're going to crack. And it certainly sounds like in that case they did. But yeah, it's, just again, like even like when you bring the story up as a question, you sit there and go like, how? Like, what would precipitate that? And pretty crazy.
Yeah, I said Sid Vader. Now, Vader was the person who stuck his finger in Arn's gaping scissor wound, apparently, to sort of stop the bleeding. So, thank goodness Vader wasn't squeamish.
Yeah. And I think Arn said to him, "Please don't let me die." I just can't, because I know these two guys so well, I can't put myself in that position. Like, what would be going through your head? He still had very young kids at home and things, and I'm sure you're thinking, at that moment, you don't know how bad these injuries are. Are you going to live or die? And I'm sure like that those things, like, his son was at that time very, very young, and his kids, and a fairly young wife at home, a lot of responsibilities. The whole thing just seems like in our business, because so much of it is created and acted out, that when you first hear that kind of a story, like I did from across the pond, you're thinking, okay, like, what's the angle to this? Like, what are they, why would they do something this stupid? And then in time you go, holy shit, it really happened. And then like the whole thing just goes like a Twilight Zone episode.
I'm sure you've seen Anchorman. The bit where they're all, after that giant brawl outside, about 16 of them, then they just sat in the office afterwards having a beer and went, that escalated quickly.
Yeah. Love Anchorman. Great movie.
Good man. Right now, I teed you up with this, the low-hanging fruit section, a few Ric Flair questions. Now, this is our third interview. I think I've asked one Ric Flair question, all of them, so I've banked a few of them up now, so I'm not sort of like a bludgeoning you with the subject that everyone wants to hear from you about. But this is something I genuinely don't know. And I'm Not Booked Terry, which is a great reference. Could you please explain the beef between himself and Ric Flair? I've been curious as to how it all got started, and I can't seem to find a definitive answer. And I don't know the definitive answer anyway. Is it just when you went to WCW, he was booker, you didn't get on, or what was it specifically?
Yeah, I'm surprised because this is sort of like the Mark Madden story I wasn't aware of earlier. I'm surprised that somebody like you's not aware of this, because I've said this so many times. But
well,
yes,
I've got my ideas and everything, but I don't know if there's like one specific instance where you thought, okay, you've sort of gone past the point now.
Yeah, when you're that stage of your career, that neophyte stage of your career, you know, when you leave your wrestling school, in my case, Dominic Taducci's, you know how to do the arm drags and the body slams and the suplexes. You have no clue of how to put them together. It's just, you know, these sort of general things. And now, do I speed up here? Do I slow down? It's all Greek initially. When I first went there, once I could see the NWA in Pittsburgh, which was around 78. I had grown up with WWF things. That's all we pretty much got in Pittsburgh. Excuse me. Now with the advent of cable, I see I can turn it on and watch it. And I'm mesmerized, right? Having had an amateur wrestling background, the WWE, like the old stuff in WWF, sort of looked like what I thought wrestling would if it went pro. But then I see this NWA stuff, and I see Harley Race, and I see Don Canoodle and Sergeant Slaughter, and I see Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, and I see Flair. And I am magnetized to it. It's, wow, this is like a complete different level of professional wrestling. And actually, I was still dabbling in watching WWF, but I was watching the NWA pretty much, and UWF exclusively. When I got there, you know, I let these guys know, Harley and all those guys that I just mentioned. Sergeant and Canoodle were gone by then, but like what, like a life changing as far as my wrestling fan eyes, how life changing this was. Like this took me just to a completely different place. And Flair specifically, I told, like, you know, he was like a huge inspiration to me. And I was trying to do it in a way not to sound like a sycophant or like a creepy guy. I was like, dude, like your work's incredible, you know. And well, he loved that, right? You know, tell me more. And but again, as a kid at that stage of your career, you don't know exactly what to do, how to fix it if it goes wrong. And so I said to him, and I prefaced it. I remember specifically saying, "I know you're busy, and if you don't have time, I totally understand. But if you ever watch one of my matches and give me some feedback, I would really appreciate it. I'd really love that. You know, I just want to learn." And I said at the end again, "But if you're too busy, I totally understand." He put his hand on this shoulder and said, "It would be an honor, sir." Okay, great, cool. Flair's going to give me some feedback. And over the next several weeks, I started getting very generic feedback. Good selling, good bumps, good comeback. Like never, hey, the arm drag was in the wrong place. This move looks sort of weak. You turned your back to the camera. There was never anything specific like that. So back then, when I still had knees, I would have the heel beat me in the corner, turnbuckle me, and I would vault to the top rope and do a blind cross body. And on that night, I specifically did not do it intentionally. And I came back, and you know, I'm not as dumb as people think I am. I can count to 20 if I can take my shoes off. But I'm telling myself in my head, please don't let this be what I'm thinking it is. And I came back and I went up to him and I said, "How was it?" He said, "Oh, it was great." And it starts the same generic stuff. And I said, "Well, how was the cross body?" And he went, like he was thinking. And honest to God, in my head, I'm saying, please say you didn't see one. Please say you didn't see one. And after what seemed to be several seconds, he went, "Perfect, better than Steamboat." And when he said that, he literally went like zip, zip, like this, zinked up to this little tiny thing. And I always tell people today, incredible in-ring performer and fails miserably as a man. You know, to me, if somebody comes up and says that to me, and I'm very cautious of this because I've told that story. When a young guy comes up to me or a girl and says, "Hey, we watch my match," if I have the time to do it, I will. And if I do, I give them the feedback. And I tell people I don't sugarcoat stuff because it never was to me. And you know, that's how you learn. You can come back and I can say, "Hey, James had a great match, man. Everything was perfect. You were fantastic. You're a star." And if you know that you didn't have a great match, you know, you just came back, but you may not know specifically what you did right or wrong, then it takes a seasoned eye to say, "Well, okay, at this point you did this or that." And my experience is most kids really value that, like I would have valued it. And I honestly did not want that to be the case. I wanted Flair to be the guy I had in my head. And, you know, we hear this phrase all the time, like, don't meet your heroes. I understand the adage, but I've met a lot of my heroes. Bruno Sammartino, he was larger than I thought, like larger in stature, just an incredible man. Dominic, Steamboat, so many guys, you know, that did live up to what I had hoped for. And you know, look, I know Rick has a lot of things going on in his life, and I try, honestly, as I get older, I try very hard to give that space to, like, you know, we all screw up as human beings, right? And it just seems like with him, it just keeps going on and on and on. You know, we're what, 30 years, give or take, past that time. I've long since put that behind. In fact, the first night I worked with Chris, or the first week or two I worked with Chris, we were at a show that Flair was going to be at that was like literally like 2 weeks after his son had died. And personal difference with anybody else, my God, that's the worst thing in the world. And Chris was quite nervous, you know, as big as he is. He's going to be in trouble. I said, look, dude, here's what's going to happen. I said, when I walk up to him, he'll be as nice as can be. He'll call me sir. And as we're walking away, he'll be burying me, you know, but that's Rick, right? So we walk over, and Chris is straggling up behind me. And I got about 10 feet from her. So I put my hands up like this. I went, Rick, I said, he looked at me and goes, yeah, franchise. I said, Rick, I said, our differences aside, I said, I'm heartbroken for you, dude. Like, I am so sorry. And he went, oh yeah. Hey, thanks, franchise. And I walked away thinking, like, I said, like, hey, sorry you lost your boots. Like, it was strange to me. And again, I'm not saying he should have wore his heart on the sleeve like that. God forbid anything ever happened to my kids. I doubt that in 2 weeks I'd be making any appearances. Probably you'd never see me again. It just odd. And I don't mean odd in a good way or a bad way, just not what I would have expected in that moment. So yeah, I still say to this day, obviously one of the, if not the greatest in-ring performer our industry's ever seen, but that giant to comparison as a man, and he slops off precipitously.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions on this sort of theme. Now, I might say this wrong, but do you, in the last few years, Ric Flair has not done himself any favours? He's divorced his fifth wife because he wanted to continue. I believe it was because he wanted to continue on drinking and partying and being Ric Flair, and I'm sure his wife just had enough of it, especially with all the health concerns he had. The dark side of the ring, allegations, other things like that. Is it the kind of thing where you, I don't know, maybe get a sense of schadenfreude or something like that, where you think, hey, I've been saying this for decades, at least more people are agreeing with you now?
Yeah. Well, surprisingly enough, from the time that it started, like not long after, several people, many close to him, would say to me, I get it. You know, I know I've known him for 20 years. I think Rick carries a lot of baggage and tries to anesthetize himself with that, self-medicate. When he was put in a medically induced coma, I wrestled with the idea of, should I go public and say anything? Because somebody out there is going to think I'm piling on, not being sincere or whatever. And I hope the fans out there know with me, if I go out of my way to say something to or about somebody, it's because I feel the compulsion to do so. It's not, I don't think in terms of agendas. And I went on Twitter and I posted out, you know, I'm praying for the Nature Boy, and, you know, we've seen enough people, our business die, that kind of thing. And he luckily came out of it. Now, because of my medical school background, I'm pretty well aware of how dire that is. You get put into a medically induced coma to save your life. The odds are heavily against you of living long after that.
5 to 10%, I believe he was given, of actually getting out then.
Yeah, it's small. Put it this way: it's the odds that you wouldn't take if it was offered to you for a bunch of money. But when he came out, he seemed to have turned over a new leaf and stayed sober for a while, and and seemed to be doing well. And he, by all appearances, seemed happy to me at that time. And not long after that, there was a big time wrestling out of Boston show down near Pittsburgh in the Ross Draper Ice Gardens. and my nephew-in-law had driven me down. So Flair was there, got paid a ton of money. He went out in the very first segment, did like a 3-minute promo, and then he needed my nephew to drive him back to the airport. So my nephew left. This is the top of the show. I'm on late in the show. Like an hour after the show's over, my nephew still hasn't come back, and we're like an hour from the airport. He ended up finally coming back like an hour and a half, 2 hours after the show had ended. And he apologized. He said, we weren't a mile down the road and Rick maybe pulled into a bar. And he said he stopped at every bar going to the airport. And I went, well, obviously means he's drinking again, right? And like, that's one of those things, like, you know, again, if you survive this medically induced coma, straighten up. Because you got a bad thing coming to you. My take now is, for what it's worth, again, trying to play a psychoanalyst, is I don't think Ric Flair, first of all, Richard Flair no longer exists. He's allowed Ric Flair to take over that body. And you know, there's a real danger to that, because that is truly a mental illness, right? Like, we are playing a role. I'm very keenly aware of the differences of Shane Douglas and Troy Martin, and I hope they're very different people. But like the last match thing, full disclosure, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch clips of it. And, you know, close friends of mine kept asking me, you know, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Because let's face it, he's one of those guys who, you know, you get this question all the time, you know, who's on your Mount Rushmore? You got to put Flair there, right? I mean, you can't say the greatest worker in the industry and not be on the his legacy is solid. 100 years from now, wrestling fans will be talking about and studying Ric Flair's work. So I found it odd, like, what could you possibly do in that ring that would not detract from that? Because let's face it, none of us can today do what we did 30 years ago, unfortunately. So why do it? And my take on it is, I think that Ric Flair now thinks the only ending to that book is you got to die in the ring, right? I mean, you can't die in a hotel room someplace. That's so normal. The oddity of that is that right there in the front row are your kids and grandkids and your coworkers that you admire. And then, you know, we're hearing these stories, if true, that he blacked out twice or something in the match. Like, those are major, major danger spots, right, for somebody that's in his condition, pacemaker and the coma and everything. I wish for Rick, and at this time of the year, Christmas, my Christmas wish for Ric Flair, Richard Flair, is that he can find whatever peace he's searching for and live out the rest of his life. That's 50 more years, happy and able to look at his grandkids and see just the wonder there in his kids and marvel. And I marvel looking at my boys and thinking, how did this idiot make these guys? Like, this is like way above my pay grade. And I honestly do, from every fiber of my being, I wish that for Rick. His legacy is secure. And, you know, now as a man, because we're all men before we're human beings before we're wrestlers, I hope he finds whatever it is he's looking for, you know, in peace.
Absolutely. One more, I think there might only be one more about Flair. Declerk Vapor, he's given himself a very complicated name here. How did Shane feel about his match with Flair at Slamboree 2000? I'm a fan of that match and the event overall. It's some messy overbooking, but it is fun. Having said that, the finish to their match was an absolute cluster. Also, was Shane happy overall with the run? I don't know what the finish was, so you might have to explain that to me as well.
There were, first of all, Rick came for that match, right? You could see in that match, if you watch closely, he's really laying his stuff in. And being from ECW, I loved that and gave it back. But when I get him in the figure 4 at the end, you see him frantically giving the office. I probably had it on too tight. And I'm sure he's thinking in his head, he's doing this on purpose. I didn't use the figure 4 in my career. Used it a couple times, but never, you know, consistently. But, you know, watch his chops and his shots and watch mine. We're laying them in pretty, you know, 90%. And that was feeding me because of ECW. That's what we liked in ECW. And the whole reason that I went there was Bischoff had contacted me. It's sort of like a bit convoluted. I'll abbreviate where I can. Somebody had called me and told me that in the booking meeting the night before in WCW, Dusty Rhodes was talking very highly of me. And so I called Dusty to thank him because, you know, he and I had differences. And he said, "No, I mean that." He said, "You're the Ric Flair of your generation." I'm like, "I don't know about that." But, you know, and he said, "Would you mind if I bring your name up?" I said, "No, do whatever you want." That's what got the ball rolling. Very soon after that, Bischoff called and said that he wanted to be the one to bring Shane Douglas and Ric Flair to television. And I said, "Well, I don't know if Rick will do it." And so long and short, they give me a very good contract. I go down there, and the first day I'm there was not for work. I had taken my ex-wife on a 2-3 week cruise. And when we got back into town the following Monday, they were going to be in Jacksonville. So I said, "Well, let's stay in Florida for a couple of days and just, you know, go sightseeing, go to Disney, whatever." And I'd go in on my dime, say hello to everybody. I'm ready to come to work. I'm, you know, really eager about this. And when you walk into the Jacksonville building, it's a really strange entrance. There's a real thin walkway. Excuse me. It goes like by bank teller windows. The security guards sit there and you got to sort of turn sideways with your bag and stuff to squeeze through. When I got to the other side, inside the door, Sandman, Mikey Whipwreck, Peaches, you know, a lot of my friends from ECW, I think maybe Raven was there. They all came up and were saying hello. You know, the backstage area, people were bustling around. And all of a sudden, as soon as I said it, the entire backstage area went deadly quiet. Boom. I could feel Flair walked in behind me. And I said it before I turned. I said, "Rick." And sure enough, he was like right behind me. I felt his presence. And we shook hands. You know, Rick, consummate politician, right? And had to be in the business he came up in. He could tell everybody there, so he put his hand. I could tell he didn't want to shake my hand, but he shook my hand. And he went to walk away. I didn't let go. And I sort of pulled him back because I now know we have an audience, right? And I said, "I think maybe you and me should talk, don't you, Rick?" And he goes, yeah, give me 15 minutes. So I went down to catering for like 45 minutes. And because I wanted him to think about it, you know, I'm serious about this. I honestly thought at that time the tables had turned and WCW was getting its ass kicked. And I thought, and I still believe, that if that angle had been carried out properly, the best Rick could give, the best I could give, that we could at least help start to turn those ratings back in our favor. Because let's face it, Rick's a machine, and I was pretty decent at the time. So I knocked on his door. He yelled to come in. I could still see him getting up out of the left corner of the room. He had one boot on, the other boot he was lacing, under tights and t-shirt. So he's holding the laces of the right boot, and he jumps up and he runs over and he puts his hand on. He goes, "I just want to start by saying I'm sorry." And I started laughing. I said, "Rick, that's not what I'm here for." I said, "First of all, I don't accept your apology because I know it's not sincere." I said, "I'm not going to say I'm sorry because you would know I'm not sincere." I said, "But that's exactly why I think this angle could work." The fans at that time were eating the dirt sheets up, and they all knew that we did not like each other. That would have drawn, I think, some major interest from wrestling fans. And so I asked him face to face, are you man enough to uphold your end of this bargain? And he went, "Yes, sir. Yes, I am." I went, "Great, let's do it. Let's tear this thing up," and left. Found out later that immediately after that face-to-face, he had started politicking to the office. And that was, you know, one of the good things and bad things about WCW at that time was there were so many people cross-politicking, right? Trying to get this one in the back, trying to get that one in the back, talk about this one, make something up about that one. There was a lot of this going on. So a lot of this was coming back to me. And it culminated in, I think it was a month after Owen had fallen to his death in Kemper Arena. That was what struck me when I walked into that building. I looked up to the roof. I don't have a fear of heights, but knowing that my friend, the Kemper Arena is it's built down into the ground. So above ground, it doesn't look very big, but when you walk in, it's huge, really, really high. And I got sick to my stomach. I mean, thinking anybody, that must have been a horrific, horrific thing. And so there was that playing over that pall over the whole night. And then they finally pull us into the room to give us the finish. And everything's going normal, going through. And then suddenly they say, okay. And then at that point, Vince Russo hit the ring in gimmick. and then David's going to hit the ring, and then Sting will come out at some point, and I'm going, oh, this is the shits, because this is not what the fans want to see. They don't want to see mumbo jumbo hot finish bull, because nobody could make a decision. They wanted to see these two gladiators go at it and decide. And when they weren't given that, I think the fans that we could have gotten back to WCW went, same old WCW, right, and walked away. And like I said, it was after that time that I learned that Rick had gone right to the office and started his politicking, which was his go-to card. That was his ace card that he always threw. And, honestly, like WCW, with what happened to them, being sold for pennies on the dollar, aside from the conspiracy theories and inside job and all that, that was the company had died already. The body just hadn't hit the floor. There was so much infighting and so much pushing and pulling inside by the powers that be that the place couldn't have survived. And it's a shame, because if you look at that time frame, that's when like the revolution, the new blood, all that was coming in, and it was meant to be. It was pitched to us as the passing of the torch. Then there comes the infamous night, the Bash at the Beach, where Hogan refuses to lay down for Jarrett, and it just really started creating camps. And then me and the Flair thing, and you could really feel like instead of this gigantic opportunity, it's just being flushed down the toilet.
Okay, so we had a bit of a break there. We put some more rights to the world and that kind of thing.
A little more caffeine.
I've got to say, I think of our chats, the non-recorded ones are probably the best ones, aren't they?
Yes.
They're certainly the most interesting. Well, I mean, it depends what you're into, but I mean, the Traveling Wilburys came up.
Yeah, I want to ask your viewers, because like I was telling James off the air between, when I'm out at conventions, I hear fans coming up and asking me to talk about a lot of other things, current events, goings on, knowing that I've been a teacher, talking about Constitution, that kind of thing. I'd be curious from your listeners, like, is there interest out there? Do people want to? Because I think we being from different sides of the pond, when I talk with you, I learn things. I have a good general idea of Parliament and English government, but I have a very deep knowledge of my mind. But I think we have interesting conversations. We learn from each other. And I think in this day and age, when we hear this phrase, fake news bandied about, and just all this wedging, and I gotta hate James because he's from England and I'm not, or whatever. To me, it's just ridiculous. And I think I would hope that there's some interest out there. So I'd love to hear back from your viewers. Is there interest in that? Okay,
then. So everybody who's watching the full interview of this will have heard that. So put in the comments. This is a specific shout out to everybody who's watching this. Put in the comments. Would you like to hear Shane say more non-wrestling stuff? Because he's big into the Constitution. He's big into everything political. He's big into just everything, life in general. So if you'd like the non-wrestling musings of Shane, if there's an audience for it, I think we should. We got quite a lot of people listening to you. So I did make a clip out of the first interview we did where you were just talking about teaching. And I think we had, it wasn't like the most watched clip, it wasn't the least watched clip, it was somewhere in between. But that was one of the most engaged, and by engaged, I mean it had some of the most comments as well. Yeah. So you really sort of reached a lot of people with your comments on, the American teaching system, sort of in the 90s when you were doing it, and today through your kids and what you're learning about what they're being taught and how they're being taught now.
Sure. Yeah. I guess and we'll cap it off with that. I guess we got to keep rolling. But for everybody out there, like my ex-wife and I were both teachers, and we were naively thinking that our children were being taught sort of similar to how we were taught. And unfortunately, it wasn't toward the tail end of my oldest son's high school career that we started seeing a little bit inside. There was an incident where I had asked to go to the school. My son's grades were starting to drop a little bit. And I was going to go mirror him. He respects me, and I can sort of like overbearingly, get on him a bit. He never wanted to disappoint. So I thought this is going to be like an open. I'm going to ask. They're going to invite me and let me go. I know how to walk through a building and not be a distraction. And instead, I was met with this like sort of monolithic, no, we don't do that. And I thought, well, that's strange. Like, why don't you do that? We always need parents involved, want parents involved, or should want parents involved. When I was teaching back in the 90s, you couldn't get parents involved. so I found it odd, and that's when we started paying a little closer attention, and then we've seen more and more. So anybody out there that thinks your children are being taught like you were taught, open your eyes. Open your eyes.
It's a different world. It's a different world out there. That for now, we're going to continue on with the wrestling, and I think I'm not going to give too much away, but hopefully Shane and I will be doing some more stuff in the future as well, and a bit more less narrow of scope as well. So we will get back onto this, and because something you mentioned just before we broke off, for the viewers, it will have been 5 minutes ago. For us, it's about 40 because we just started chatting again, about everything else. Backstage in WCW, when you went there the final time, you mentioned Vince Russo and Hulk Hogan and all that folderol that happened there. I'm going to give you a couple more examples. I think DDP and Buff Bagwell tried to stage a fight in the catering to make it seem... Just all this kind of nonsense that WCW was doing, or the guys of WCW were doing in the back to convince just the other boys that the rivalry was real. Have you got any specific examples of that happening?
Of work shoots?
Yeah, work shoots trying to convince the boys, not the fans.
Not really. To me, the overriding thought of what was going on in the dressing room at that time was truly the inmates were running the asylum. They would, when you'd get to TV, there would be a big whiteboard, and they'd have the entire 2-3 tapes when they were doing the tapings. You had a lot of matches written up there, and you'd go through and you'd find your matches and where they were. You'd note them down. And then I would start to think, okay, what can I do with Goldberg? What can I do with this person? And I'd start my wheels working on my matches. Like, what can I do for my matches? Well, every taping, there were multiple people, but one I remember specifically was Kevin Nash. Would walk in and he'd look at the board and he'd get the eraser and he'd go. And start erasing matches. Then he'd write other matches in. Then the company would do those matches. So a couple of times, like, my matches were involved. So, like, I've got ideas I've already set up, and now that's gone someplace else. It was real. There was a lot of tension. You could cut it with a knife in the dressing room because there was generational heat, for lack of better terms. And I always found that odd because that very first match with Randy Savage in WWF, this guy's the top heel on the planet. And I'm just a nobody kid. And he came back and he kept thanking me. And thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Kept doing that. And I said, Randy, that's not necessary. That's what we do. He goes, and he jumped up and put his, no, it is necessary. He said, if you ever want to have a career in this business, make sure you thank the guy that put you over because he's allowing you to have that. And I always have remembered that. We've all done favors. We've all had favors done for us. And there is a realism in this business of we're all getting older, right? And what the franchise was in the 90s, I couldn't possibly do today. And I'm fine with that. That's a very fond memory in my head, but I am fine with where I am in my life right now. And if I could do something to help teach the other kids and elevate them and give them how it was given to me, I'm a teacher by nature, so I'm more than willing to do that. I just recall that dressing room being, you could sense that there was an end coming. Like at this, think of this moment. I mean, this company's a big company, a conglomerate owned by a conglomerate. There's the week we got sold, I think we did a 5.6 in the ratings. So, hardly that we're on our knees. We were just not doing as well as WWF at the time. So, by any stretch, by the way, I went back several years ago and looked at that time slot on TNT since. I think the highest rating they've had in that time slot since then, when I checked, it was like a 1.3. So 5.6 to 1.3. I'm sure that they'd like to revisit that idea if they could get in a time machine. But the point was that every generation in this business, there's a time when they're coming up, there's a time when they dominate, and there's a time when they're sort of leaving or exiting the business or passing the torch. That's how it's always gone. Bruno did it. Generation before his did it. Every generation does it. And I found with Hogan's and Flair's generation, they were very, very oppositional to that. And so it then became, sort of this, like the night I remember with Jarrett and Hogan, almost immediately, like boom, as soon as the decision was made, he wasn't going to do the favor, there was these camps that popped up and, people bickering and talking, and just like the whole chemistry of the dressing room changed instantly. And, it's like, to me, ultimately, this is all about business, right? So if I hired James to come to work for my company, I'm going to tell James what I need from him, and James will give me that. And if James doesn't want to give me that, I may not, the old guys would say, "You're fired, get out." I might have a little more understanding. Okay, well, I understand your point, but have a discussion. But if ultimately I believe we have to go my direction and you don't want to do that, then I don't need your services anymore. And that's what should have happened in WCW, and it didn't happen in WCW. So that cancer started to metastasize and grow. And then we had the whiteboard being erased, and we had little issues popping up between guys you wouldn't expect to pop up. It just became very much like this company's headed to the morgue. You could feel it.
With Jeff and Hogan, how long did it take for you to sort of figure out what the actual story was? Because I believe, wasn't it meant to be I always hate using the wrestling terms for this, but I can't really think of anything else, is meant to be a work or a semi-work, semi-shoot that ended up being a full shoot somewhere in the middle. What did you sort of work out from all that?
Well, in our business, if you're like I am, highly suspicious of everything, that's your first go-to. What's the angle? Like when Owen fell to his death, I was at home and I'm thinking, this is a terrible angle. Why would they be doing this, right? And then you realize it's true, and it changes everything. That night in the building, in the real moment, like we talked about presentism, right, and viewing it through a contemporary lens. My view of it at that point in the building was not that there was a work shoot going on, but that there was now these things that were quietly spoken of in hotel rooms and cars was bubbling out into the open. And, so I think the net result was what Jeff just went out and laid down for him.
Yeah.
Just sort of like an exclamation point of, what it was supposed to be. But there was never any passing of that torch. And with all due respect to those guys, I'm not talking bad about them whenever I say Hogan was an amazing draw. He was getting older. Flair was an amazing worker. He was getting older. It was time to. Terry Bradshaw was a great quarterback for the Steelers. I don't want to see him quarterback the Steelers today. It just, and it catches up with all of us. And I think that whole thing, that whole episode of that generation refusing to pass that torch. Some guys like Steve Austin figured out a way to take it from them. Other guys like me was more than happy to just walk away from it. But the politics of the business had always been the cancer. And I used to say that openly. It'll eat this company up, and it always does. If it's not dealt with, look what's happening in AEW. I mean, that cancer's growing. It's not been dealt with.
Next question, we're going to go on to ECW, and this was something that I mentioned to you just beforehand. You and Chris, he's the guy who does Appalachian Championship Wrestling, if people are wondering.
Ugly guy.
Yeah. Big boy. He's a big boy, our Chris. And you two were arguing, it turned out Chris was right, that you had put the face paint on of Doink the Clown when you were feuding with him with Matt Bourne.
Yeah. When he brought it up, I said, "Oh no, I never had the makeup on," because my predominant memory of that was that it was very brief, that Matt was in and out. And I recall specifically the rings, the promo with him with the face half painted and not. He was going to be doing this in and out of character thing. And the promo was mesmerizing. I was sitting, Paul would always have me watch the promos because I could add an eye for it. And, when I catch myself doing this, there's something magical going on. It just sucks you in. And I thought, he didn't like the gimmick, but he made the best of it. And now this was a chance for him to put a real finality to that in an entertaining and money-drawing way that I thought was brilliant. And he walked away. He quit. I thought, why? Dude, that was the perfect point. But yeah, Chris had said about me having the makeup, and I was absolutely certain I had never done that because there was zero memory of that. And he showed me the clip, and I'm watching it. And as soon as I started watching it, I went, "Oh shit, he's right. Yeah, I do remember this now." Right? There was something. What was it with 911? Was there? Wasn't it? Moose is sitting right here, by the way.
I think so. Yeah.
But watching the tape back, it's funny because there's so many memories up there. We talked about this before. A lot of stuff you forget. It's not that you're trying to forget it or whatever. There's just so many other things that overlay over that. But then you see the clip of it and you go, boom! It floods the memory back. And I do remember that time. And I remember, Matt had to put the paint on because I didn't know how to do it. And there was this, sort of overhead thing with the wig. And it was meant to be a distraction, I think, like made for the fans to believe that it was him when in fact it was going to be the introduction of this new character. Yeah, it's, like I said a second ago, us old dogs still do learn new things. But I like that when somebody corrects something to me and I'm told that I was wrong on it.
You said that Matt left before you could really finish off that feud. What was the reason?
No idea. He just that happened in ECW a handful of times when we did when Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko left. We had just launched months before this triple threat, and they leave. Well, I knew Candido, and I definitely wanted Candido in it. But then, who's that third person? And Brian Lee. I always liked Brian's work. Brian was a bigger guy. I wanted to have like that sort of mixture so we could sort of do a bunch of different things. And we brought him in. He walked out of ECW. He just didn't show up one weekend, and I hadn't seen him since. Like it was just like the joke in the business was we're going to put him on a milk carton, right? He just disappeared. And luckily for us, Bam Bam had come in right after that, and it was a no-brainer. But there was this, wrestling, especially with a company like ECW, there's not a ton of money to float around. So there's a lot of these moving parts that sometimes would show up and then disappear. Somebody figured in and then doesn't come back. And it wasn't like a weekly thing, but it happened here and there. Matt was one of those. He just, and I later, I'd seen Matt several times later. In fact, I was up in Portland one time working with there was a local television station up there trying to put a thing together. And he and I went out and worked. And boy, he reminded me of how stiff he could be in the ring. But he said about that, like he didn't like the doink gimmick, but he was making a lot of money with it. And he was afraid of like putting that end point to it and moving on. And I get that. Again, like this is what wrestling business does to you. You got to make a living. So that's why he did it. But I thought this was a brilliant way because the ECW TV was hot at the time and getting hotter. And I thought this is like a brilliant, brilliant character. And he was so good at it because he could so seamlessly go from Matt Bourne to Doink and back that I think he really, really missed a great opportunity there to introduce like an unbelievably new character into wrestling.
Speaking of people who sort of just turned up and then disappeared again, Tully Blanchard, you mentioned him recently, but you feuded with him, are we talking 95?
Yeah.
He sort of turned up, you did like an hour battle in maybe the ECW arena, and then he just sort of just went again. How did you get Tully in, for starters, and then why did he go so soon?
Yeah, I think that came right off the heels of Arn being there. And he came in and he was insistent that he wanted to do the hour. And he had not been in the ring for several years at that point, and I know like, an hour match is a hard match. I don't care if it's a work. An hour, if you're out there working, it's hard. And especially in that building, because the ECW arena back then used to be like an oven. It was brutal hot conditions in there. And so I kept trying to get at least to have a plan B. Like if you blow up out there, let's do this. He was insistent. And if you look at the match, and I don't fault Tully for this. I think he had forgotten how hard an hour match can be, and not in that building. The conditions in that building, and it was pretty apparent pretty early, like 10, 12 minutes in, like he was getting gassed, and so he was bringing the match down in pace, and I knew like we were hitting a point where we had to start to bring the pace up a bit to keep the audience, and it overwhelmed him, I think, is what happened. And not having that plan B when the audience got up and turned their backs to the match, instantly you stop and you think like, man, that's a kick in the balls, right? It's but in hindsight, that was the ECW fans, right? Go out and give them a shitty product. They're gonna let you know immediately. I think it's one of those things. There was a second match with Tully. It might have been the night before again, but my brain on the range of these things. We were in a high school in New Jersey, and there was, I knew Tully pretty well, but not nearly as well as I knew the other guys. Tully is, a very quiet person by nature. In that moment, when you're in the wrestling at that point, and this guy's a big star, you're thinking, he's being off-putting, right? And so I think it's just his personality, a little bit hush-hush, more type of person. Paul and Taz called me to the office, and they said, Taz said, do you need me on standby? I said, for what? He said, like, if he starts to shoot. I said, Tully's not going to shoot. He said, well, because if we're working a match, I'm never as a wrestler going to feed you my back. But in a work match, we're going to do what we have to do. And so they started getting me thinking like outside. Like, I didn't know Tully as well as I knew the other guys, but I didn't imagine Tully doing that. And I remember Taz and Perry and maybe Bubba being up on, there was a stairway at the far end of the building if they had to hit it. And I said to them, like, look, if something goes, if that happens in the ring, I'll be more than capable of handling myself. And I just couldn't see Tully doing it and didn't do it. But there were those thoughts. And again, I think, that was Paul as a booker looking and seeing in context of the type of promos I was doing, about, send Hogan, send Flair, send Shawn, send Brett, we'll shoot, things like that somebody could have conceivably tried to take advantage of that. But, again, I had an amateur background, but I was confident enough that if something would go south in the ring like that I'd certainly be able to turn that around. But just like the weird musings of things that you remember popping up and happening in the buildings at those times. ECW was very guarded for a reason. Like, the uprise company, the renegades, and everybody on the outside of the mainstream industry, I think, wanted to try to do something to shut us up, to knock us off, to do something about it, but I think that's the special ingredient in ECW.
I'm going to move on now, and this is actually a question from me. I saw this on Twitter or something recently, and I wish I hadn't. I would have rather pulled my eyes out. That I hate injuries. I hate disgusting injuries. You're in the ring with a chap I've never seen before or since. He was of, let's call it politely, of generously proportioned carriage, and he tries to jump off the top rope, and his leg totally buckles out. Who was this guy, and what happened?
That was he was one of the trainees at the ECW House of Hardcore. And because of his build and look, they had him doing sort of like an Abdullah the Butcher type gimmick. In the school, he could do the Abbey elbow off the top rope beautifully. So there was this setup. Gary Wolf's neck had gotten broken a few weeks or month before. And I was working Pitbull too. And so there was this sort of waves into this finish. I get Pitbull number 2, Anthony Durante, his veins and arteries were reversed. So you and I, when we push our blood to our face, we turn red. He would turn blue because he was pushing non-oxygenated blood up. Really a strange thing, but a great asset for wrestling, right?
Yeah.
So we would do the thing. Franny would distract him. I'd take his chain, cut him down, wrap the chain, put him in a full Nelson. He'd turn himself blue. During this time, the Blue World Order is supposed to hit. Then this kid is supposed to hit, and this is all going on behind me. What was his name? What do they call the kid that broke his leg? It was like an Arab name of some kind. Anyway, he gets up there, and I didn't know at the time. Anthony's 280, and I've got him in a full Nelson, so it's not real easy to move around with him or facing the camera. And eventually, Sandman is supposed to come out and hit me to knock me off, just sort of like one of these wild ECW finishes. So everybody's come out, everybody's in the ring doing their thing behind me. Sandman comes out, and I push Anthony's head out of the way, and I feed mine to take the shot, and he walks right past me. Right before he gets to the ring, I hear this, sounds like a baseball bat snapping, and then these ungodly curdling screams. It just like over top of the audience. And I mean, what the hell's going on? And all of a sudden, whack, I feel a whack right across my neck. And the second one, and my arms dropped, and my brain's going, get the hell out of here. And I dropped down, and I rolled to the apron. I'm laying there for a second, and I went to reach up, pick myself up with the rope, and my arms wouldn't move. Meanwhile, this screaming is all still going on. It's chaos. Francine helps me out with this. We're walking to the dressing room. My vision's going like this. And we get to the midpoint between the two curtains where it's pitch black, and I collapse onto my elbows. I'm out. I'm not knocked out, but I'm out. And So what happened in the ring was when this kid, I'll call him Abby, got up there, he had never done that elbow in front of a live audience. It was always in the school. So he panics for a second. I've watched the playback. He goes to go and he starts to panic, and now his momentum is going, so he tries to readjust and fix it mid-momentum, and came down the leg, and it literally snapped the tibia and fibia in half, and which is a horrendous break. And he was in a lot of pain. The odd thing was the aftermath of that. They thought my neck was broken, and I'm thinking, like, this is karma. Gary's neck just got broken, and how am I going to make a living and all that? And the doctor, the ECW doctor, finally calms me down, and he said, "Look, it's going to take you to the hospital. You got a stinger that's going to check you out." So I get in the ambulance, and there's an older lady, like EMT, and she says, "What line do you want your arms in? What arm do you want your lines in?" I said, "Lines? I'm not getting any lines. I'm just going to get X-rayed and coming back." She goes, she put her hand on. She goes, "Honey, you're going to be in the hospital a long time. You got a broken neck." And I started going, "Oh, son of a bitch!" They get me to the hospital, and I lay there in this like super high collar, and I'm laying there for hours. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell's going on here? Like, why is this taking so long? And I can hear screaming down the hall. It didn't that moment put it together. Here they took the kid to the same hospital, and the whole staff was working on him. And finally came back, and thank God it was just a stinger. And I went back to the building later. But yeah, he never wrestled again after that. But he does some local stuff now. I saw him a couple of years ago. But yeah, it was a horrendous break. And again, like I said to Paul afterwards, nobody knew that he didn't do this in front of an audience before. Like, this is what we do can be extraordinarily dangerous if you're not well versed in it. And, point taken with this kid, and, had an incredibly severe injury that should never happen. But it did. And thankfully he's okay now. But that's the kind when you're booking, you've got to be cognizant of those things, because, the mass transit thing in Boston, this kid now, looking back, I am shocked and very relieved that somebody didn't die in an ECW ring, because there was again, looking back, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. The swing scaffolds with Tommy and Brian Lee, the 4 table high bump, when he hit him, the tables didn't go like this, like they thought they tipped. The fan, the fire with the branding of Mick and Terry Funk. There were so many times that something could have gone much, much, much worse. And luckily it didn't. But, point taken, looking back, for anybody going to try that same stuff later, be cognizant of that.
As you know, I've mentioned it a couple of times, I'm particularly squeamish when it comes to leg injuries as well, because even my own, and I'm just like, I have PTSD from my own. It's like I was there. Yeah. And, it's disgusting. It's basically the Sid leg snap kind of thing. So don't hunt it out, but I will find out what that guy's name was for when I post this.
Hey, James, are we going longer, or are we going?
Yeah, we started like we were bullshitting.
Yeah. I'll pause one sec. Sorry, we're back. Sorry, yeah, me and Shane were talking so long that anyway, we're wrapping this up 2 hours exactly. I'm going to ask you this one now. Slim Johnny 904 says, never forget the infamous interview where he told Terry Funk he would smash his knee into obligatory or whatever. Yeah, amazing word. You're one of the best speakers in wrestling history. Any memorable promo botches from you or someone opposite you?
Yeah, that was a offshoot of ECW being a company with very limited means, right? So typically we would do that over a reshoot in most other promotions. I think Paul one time had told me, yeah, it's definitely a mess up on the word, but it also gives some naturalness to it, right? That this is just people talking, and every time I see that promo, and it's not often, but what I do see, I cringe, because I prided myself on my promos and believe it to be an important part of our industry. And when I see that every time, I know it's coming, and I hear it, nails on the blackboard, right? But it was, I wanted to do it again, and we had people lined up to do promos, and again, we didn't have unlimited tapes and stuff in those days, and much different world today. But yeah, Yeah, point taken.
Yeah. Are there any other ones where, maybe not from you, but someone opposite you in the ring, where they just completely collapsed or completely forgot what they were saying?
Yeah, the very first promo I ever did it was in Dallas Reunion Arena. It was still UWF technically, but it had been bought by the NWA. So I had a match. I'm back in the dressing room. Nobody had said anything to me earlier. And I come back and I'm sweating and I'm blown up and I'm winded and I'm ready to get a shower. And as soon as I walk into the dressing room, Dustin said, "Go down to ringside. Jim Ross is going to interview you." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, just down. What am I supposed to say?" He said, "Jim will tell you when you get there." So I go running back down to the ringside. And right as I get there, Jim goes, "Oh, here we have young Shane Douglas," and puts the microphone on my face. And it's funny in hindsight because I did become decent at promos. The reason I did, or at least part of the reason, was I was completely brain dead. I didn't know what to say. I remember hearing my heartbeat in my ears. Like I could feel 10,000 eyeballs as laser beaming me. And I was so mad at myself when I got back to the dressing room because I thought, this is part of this game. Like if you can't do this, get out. And I started working on that, like watching guys and seeing, what they were doing. Like I'm like with Flair, you'd immediately pick up that the kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, jet flying, limousine riding, son of a gun, that was his thinking time. He could, without thinking, blurt that out. And by the time he got it out, his brain had gotten to the next thought. So for the franchise, it would become the laugh, right? The ha, 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 ha. And that would give me enough time to get to that next point that I didn't say obligatory or whatever, and could get them done in one take. But it was based off of the very first one that I ever did in Dallas Reunion Arena. I ask people about this all the time. I've never seen a copy of it. It must be out there someplace because it aired. So I'd love to see it because I'm sure I would cringe even more whenever I see it. But that really was the impetus, the seed that would plant into what the franchise would become later, because I did know that was a keen part of what we did, and all the guys that were making money were very, very good at that. And so that's the day that it started. But if anybody has it out there, please send it and let me cringe even more at it because it was awful.
Yeah, come on, tape traders. We know you're out there. Because I can't remember how much I recorded or not because Chris in the back just went, "Oh my God, you've only done 1 hour 17." Because I actually worked it out. We were probably chatting for about 1 hour 40 just on whatever we were chatting on. Which, okay, right, so we're going to skip ECW. We're going to ask some other questions. WWF. B. Polovich. What is your opinion of Triple H as a person and your opinion of Triple H becoming arguably the most powerful person in wrestling today? A lot of people have asked your opinion of Triple H, as well as several people alluding to him stealing your presentation and attitude when he turned heel in 1999.
Yeah, there was, first of all, the stealing stuff, to me, we all borrow from each other. I think if you look at the franchise character closely, you'll see some Funk, some Flair, maybe a little bit of Bruno-isms. There's a little bit, and that was something that was told to me early on in my career by Scott Irwin. So we all borrow from each other. But paying homage to somebody or borrowing, whatever word you want to use, phrase, I was at home one time with my ex-wife, and I'd gone into the kitchen, the show was on, to make a sandwich. And I'm hearing Triple H do a promo. And I'm listening to it, and I'm sort of like half listening to it. And it's like my brain's going like this, scratching. I'm making the sandwich, and as I'm, finishing up and putting the sandwich together, I come around the corner and I hear, "It's my belt, it's my belt, it's my damn belt." And I went, that's why it scratched my brain. That was my promo almost verbatim, except I used the F-bomb, not damn. And I thought then, borrowing is one thing. I would be embarrassed to take somebody's promo, especially a fairly famous promo, and word for word make it mine. I would rework it, change the phrases, whatever, but I would never do that. In fact, Paul wanted me to, at one point, start using Flair's woo, his chop, and his figure four. I said, "Are you out of your effing mind? I'm out here railing the guy, and you want to play him?" So luckily was smart enough to refuse that. Plus, Flair's been done to perfection. So, we all borrow from each other. But then I started getting the pictures of the what do they call those sort of beanie caps that I would wear backwards, the Kanga hats. I saw that and everything in the attitude. And my take on Hunter is he's an extremely intelligent guy, right? If you're going to rip something off, rip something good off. If you're going to create a character in a company that's pretty much worldwide, you might as well rip that company off that's only locally seen in a few places and tape traders and stuff. But I look beyond the whole franchise thing or whatever. Hey, I'm happy that somebody thought that character, good enough to pull something up. Steve Austin has done the same thing. And most people don't see this. I saw it immediately. Right after he's in ECW, you see this emergence of this amazing character, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the first time I saw it, I'm like, wow, he's brilliant. Because that's a mix of the three strongest ECW characters. It's clearly the Beer, Sandman. It's clearly Taz, the immovable object. And it's clearly the franchise, the F-bombs and all the rest of it. I thought, well, you take those three characters and mix them together, what a brilliant move. See, I don't get angry at anybody for doing it. I'm happy that somebody thought it good enough to pull off and steal from or pay homage to. But I look at Hunter in a different way that, with everybody that's come and gone there, a lot of, Flairs and Michaelses and guys that were really, really, really political. And the guy that sort of like tagged along, he's now sitting atop the company. I don't, again, I don't watch current stuff very often. I catch clips and stuff people send me, not because I'm not wanting to watch it. I just have no time. So like typically I'll get clips and stuff sent to me. But I was asking Moose this the other day, like when he first took over, there was a lot of fanfare and a lot of people talking about this new direction and the huge Vince McMahon is now gone. It seems like it's sloughed off and it's quieted up. Like I haven't heard any buzz out of WWE. Has there been any buzz out of there?
I believe that TV is now more logical and it's just a generally better product. But as far as like major buzz, I expect that to happen in the next few months in the build up to WrestleMania because I think they're getting The Rock back. They're definitely getting John Cena back. So that'll probably come in the next few months in the build to WrestleMania in early April, whenever it is.
Yeah, the stuff some of the changes that he instituted, and I don't profess to know all of them. I thought it absolutely insane when they sanitized, belt, title, wrestling, stuff. I mean, like, if I'm going to go out and start a sports league where they throw around a pigskin and they're all wearing shoulder pads and helmets, I can call it tiddlywinks if I want to. Everybody watching it's going to say, why is he calling it tiddlywinks? It's football. And so that seemed really, really strange. And I think in that you can start to see like the mental process, like really, really overthinking this, right? Wrestling fans are tuning in to watch that. They're watching it and they're talking to their friends the next day and say, hey, did you watch the WWF? Hey, great wrestling match on. He has the title, the belt, whatever. And so I thought that crazy. I was happy to see that he reinstated those. First of all, I don't know how you do a promo. Like where's those like George Carlin again, right? The 7 words you can't say on TV. Where's the 150 words I can't say on wrestling? Oh, wrestling. Yeah. So good blood can be a good thing. I don't know if Hunter has the same kind of, at least when I knew him, the same kind of vision that Vince did. You have to be a visionary. You could be a day-to-day operator, manager or something, but to have that vision. Paul Heyman had this vision of something that nobody had ever seen before and created it. And for a brief moment, changed wrestling. I'm not so sure that he has that kind of visionary way of thinking. If he does, and if he's developed that, I think change can be good, especially in a place like that had become, like, let's face it, it was Vince McMahon's playground. And, I think it could be good. I hope for them, excuse me. I hope for the business. I hope for the wrestlers. I hope for the fans that AEW gets its stuff right. I hope that Impact continues to improve. I hope that WWE gets red hot because a rising tide rises all ships. Good for the boys, good for the fans, good for the companies, good for the bottom line. But as of right now, we seem to be in this sort of uncertain period as to how these things are progressing. So we'll see.
Yep, there's a funny thing with the ratings. Some record lows have been posted recently as well, but hopefully that's just a blip with the NFL on. I
Right.
will go on to the next question. Ibsan Arroyo, sorry, I always blow that guy's name. Bob Backlund brought you out to the ring for a couple of matches during your 1995 WWF run. Did the office want him as your manager?
No, I don't think it was as a manager. I think they were calling him advisor. I was a big fan of Bob's, and Bob plays a certain kind of like country bumpkin type thing. Bob's an incredibly intelligent guy, and if you know anything about his investments and things like that, things outside. But I've known a lot of guys in the wrestling business that sort of portray this disarming character to sort of like lower expectations or whatever in the dressing room. And then you find out later that they're very, very different from that character.
Were you a Bruno guy or a Bob guy more, or was the seamless transition? Okay.
When Bob was champion, he was the guy that I wanted to get beat. And that was largely because I was at that phase, 14, 15, 16-year-old, where I liked the heels. But I've gone back, and let's face it, Bob was like they say about Lance Storm, incredible in-ring performer. They say the too vanilla, right? Like there's not enough panache in a business that's built on elan and panache. He, as a performer, like as that babyface performer champion, he seemed just very, very dry to me. When he became the heel character later, there was something interesting there. And I don't know if it's because my affinity for Bob, but he would always walk around in the back. He had this little dictionary thing where you'd hit it and put a word up, and he'd go, Shane, what does this word mean? And I'd give him, and he always played like he was amazed that I knew that. I was like, yeah, Bob, you don't know what that word means. But he, a very bright guy. As a kid, though, growing up, like in Pittsburgh especially, Bruno Sammartino was like part of the fabric, if that makes sense. The hockey team, the Penguins, hadn't yet gotten good, so they were awful, in fact. Our baseball team through the late 70s had been pretty strong and good and won the series in 79. And the Steelers, of course, were, just running roughshod. So the City of Champions thing got pulled up, and, that got tagged onto Pittsburgh. And Bruno, for all of us that grew up there, Bruno was part of that. There's a famous sandwich shop down in the Strip District called Primanti's that everybody in Pittsburgh goes to. And they have all these sports heroes painted on the walls like caricatures of sports heroes. Bruno's huge right inside the door when you walk in. I get down there once every couple of years or so, and I still to this day get, hey, franchise, and then some question about Bruno. It used to be when he was alive. How's Living Legend doing, right? He hadn't wrestled in 30, 40 years. He was just that big a part of the fabric in Pittsburgh, so I obviously gravitated to him. As I got older, though, and Bob was the champion. And remember back then, the championship reigns were forever.
Yeah.
I think Bob's at 7, Bruno's for 12. And, like as a kid, I just gravitated towards those heels and wanted to see the heels win and stuff. But I saw in hindsight some matches with Bob that were amazing. And in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, he was wrestling Don Morocco, who's 275, 280 at this time. The first match in the Guard, they went in arena, Civic Arena. They did a 1-hour brawl, and they came back next month for the rematch and did a 2-hour Broadway. And during that 2-hour match, all the lights come up and all the security's running up into the stands. I think it was a lady died up in the stands that night. So during this point of the match, Bob has Don put him in an arm lock, an arm bar. And 15, 20 minutes later, they get the ambulance in and get the gurney out and everything. The lights go back out. They start performing again, and Bob rolls over to his knees, gets up to his feet, and then he slowly picks 280-pound Don Morocco, completely dead weight, no way to help. His arms and legs are locked into this hold, and picks him up on his shoulder. And it was at that point that I thought, this is like an hour something into the match, and he's picking. Like once I became a wrestler and learned how difficult that is, and I thought, this guy's got freaky strength. Like this is, something far above. But he, as a performer and as champion, I didn't like him as a kid. But once I got to know him as a person, I had a lot of respect for him, and always loved seeing Bob.
Yeah, as a kid, I was like Crazy Bob as well, with the bow tie and the sort of thing going on. He was great in that role. Right, we're going to go to WCW again, and Rob Ross, we got a few questions about this. He would love to know your thoughts on the Revolution and how the Revolution came about.
When I had gotten there, and it became apparent to me that the Flair thing was not going to be given the time it should have been given. The same thing I did in ECW. Every great promotion I've grown up watching had that heel stable that ran roughshod, and House of Humperdinck, later the Four Horsemen, and the Valiant Brothers, and all these little blocks of things that were given this point of time. That once you saw that entity involved in an angle, you're like, oh shit, the Horsemen are here, or oh shit, the House of Humperdinck's here. So I thought in ECW we needed a heel stable and be contributory to the company and the promotion, and it worked. So when we got there, and it became apparent to me that the Flair thing was not going to be given its time, that they kept kicking around this idea of doing a new Four Horsemen. I hate doing new anything because that's already been done to perfection. Anytime you say Four Horsemen, the fans immediately think you can say new Four Horsemen 2, Four Horsemen Redux, whatever. The fans go right back to Flair, Arn, Tully, and JJ and those guys. This was a chance now. There's Chris and Ben, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko. We can't do 3 because we did that in the last one. We have to do 4 or a different number. 2 can't really be a stable. So I started running these ideas to my head, and then I thought with Perry. Perry was always an impressive in-ring performer to me, and we always got along fantastic. So I thought, let's put these 4 guys together. As we come up, we can do the same thing as I did with Flair in ECW, elevate me as a heel by, I thought at the time, turning on Flair. And then here in WCW, we will look right into the camera and say, we're better than the Four Horsemen. And they went with the idea to a certain point. There was 2 incidences that happened. The first one was in the Palace Hills, Auburn Palace, they call it Palace Hills Arena, where WrestleMania 3 was. They sent us to the ring. We were threatening to burn an American flag, which you couldn't do today after 9/11. And they sent Hacksaw Jim Duggan down. I'd known Jim for years and certainly trusted him with the 2x4. So we had obviously choreographed. Perry would feed him first, take the shot. I'd feed him second, take the shot. He'd go through us. We'd cut him down, and then Brett would come out and make the save. As he's running to the ring, it's sometimes like I wear reading glasses, and sometimes again the different colors and stuff, lighting and things in the building. Sometimes things are hard to see for me. And as he's running to the ring, I'm thinking something looks weird. Like what? And I'm like squinting to try to see him. So Perry, he gets up on the apron, he hits Perry, and as he's running, what looks odd to me is the board's going like this, boing, boing, it's like rubber. And I'm thinking, is this an optical illusion? Like, what am I looking at? And when I see him hit Perry, the thing bends, sort of like a Gumby doll, and it's bent, and he's trying to straighten it out. And I yelled to him, "Sorry, Jim, I ain't feeding that." And I rolled, and then we did the rest of it, and Brett came out and made the save. The heat in the building that night, through both the beatdown of Jim and the threat of burning the American flag, was about as hot as I'd ever seen heat. And there's money that can be drawn in that, especially with the back and forth that we saw with Brett once he hit the ring. He would be our next target. When I got to the back, J.J. Dillon said to me, "That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen." And I said, "You should have spoke up at the booking meeting." And because, again, this stuff's all planned, right? This is all on paper before we go out there and do it. So if you had a question or a thought about it, you should have said it then. But I know heat, and that kind of heat will draw. In fact, that night I told the guys in the dressing room, look, the idea of heading out to a bar by ourselves or whatever probably wouldn't be a good idea, because that kind of heat will generate somebody to stab you, maybe shoot you, whatever. I said, we have to stay together at all times while we're doing this. because none of these guys had ever done that kind of heat stuff to that level. And I knew this was a different kind of heat we were seeing, and certainly a heat that would draw money. It was not long after that they decided to make the change in bookers, and Kevin Sullivan's name was being thrown around. I'd always gotten along fine with Kevin, but how do I say this? The heat between him and Chris, supposed heat, I'd always believed to be a work. And until this happened, there were several times. There was one point I went into a meeting. We all went into a meeting with Bill Banks. Was it Banks?
I always get Bill Bush. Right, yeah. One of the two.
Yeah. And he was very open, and we talked very openly. I had secretly recorded I had a mini cassette recorder in my pocket in case something was said that could be used later. So I still have that somewhere in my house. But this then started like a 2-3 day period of where like a lot of weird stuff was happening. Like we would get to the building and be told that our match had been canceled or taken off, or one of our matches. And Monday night we had a pay-per-view Sunday in Cincinnati. We were in Columbus, Ohio for television on Monday. We all got there, had the meeting with Bill. We were all down in catering at different points, and here comes a lot of security walking in. And I see one of them walk over to Chris Benoit, and a couple of them walk over to Dean, and some over to Perry. And I look up, and here comes a couple of them walking over to me. So, we get kicked out of the building, and back at the hotel that night, we were all packing our stuff up to fly home. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know at that point that the other guys had threatened their resignations. I never did. I wasn't going to. And so this turned into like a month-long game of brinksmanship, right? Like Diana Myers, the lead counsel. What this basically boiled down to was she was pissed off that wrestlers were making more than her, because she saw us as Cro-Magnon Neanderthals. And how dare we be allowed to make more money than her? And I said to her one time, you want to put a pair of boots on and tights, I'm sure you can go out there and give it a try if you want to make more money. There's a lot of weird stuff, like I said earlier, and this was just one more of the offshoots of that. And that night at the hotel at the airport, we're all getting ready to go to the airport for our flights home, and we made a pact. I think Conan was there. I think Ray was there. Dean, Chris, Perry, me. There were like 7 or 8 of us sitting around the table. We drank a couple bottles of Beaujolais wine because that's what Chris liked, Benoit. And we all promised to stick together, that anything one of us hears will share with the others. And this is when the infamous Connecticut Ramada call comes into me from Vince Russo. So I was not hearing all the stuff. I had gotten part of the stuff where we all promised to stick together, and then these guys had gone rogue behind my back. Which again, I don't fault them. Everybody, each one of us has to look out for our best interest. But with Dean, it's although we've both put it behind us, there's still a little bit of why there. Because all I'd asked when I spoke to Dean that day, I said, just give me a heads up. My wife was finally, after 8 years of infertility treatments, pregnant, and he was well aware of the emotional stress that was involved with that. And I said, just give me a heads up. I got a bun in the oven. I got a wife. I got a house to take care of here. So just let me cover my ass. And he swore to me, and then which I found out about 10 minutes later, or an hour and 10 minutes later, that swear was not valid. Just things like that. But there were a lot of oddities like that going on at the time. And I think this sort of covered several questions we've had so far, like the new blood and the revolution and this passing of the torch that never happened. In that, you could see like the revolution and the new blood was sort of decapitated in one move. And again, an attempt to try to keep that power with the guys that were now clearly getting over the hill. So when everybody talks about the death of WCW, there are 1,000 ingredients that went into that. And like this was certainly one of those things. All these things were doing the same thing, killing the company a little bit by death of 1,000 cuts. and it was just a matter of time before the body hit the floor.
Absolutely. We have, I'm looking here, coming up to 60 minutes exactly left. So as conscious as ever that Chris wants to get you doing whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, we'll ask a few more questions and I will cut it off at 2 minutes exactly. Marshall Ruddle, thoughts on Mike Awesome? Why do you think he was so misused in WCW when it seemed like he had all it took to be a star? And I want to add to this as well. ECW, that one night stand thing, reunion, WWE in 2005, and
Right.
Joey Styles makes some really, in hindsight, crappy comments about Mike Awesome. And I can't figure out why, because obviously Paul wasn't paying him and Mike moved on to greener pastures to support his family and himself. So, I mean, I don't understand why there was such vitriolic hatred. Was it just Paul Heyman Kool-Aid kind of thing?
Mike Awesome?
Yeah, about Mike Awesome's leaving ECW to go to WCW.
Yeah. I think by that time, because Joey doesn't, he can be acerbic. Joey's more about being professional to what the program is, what the angle or show is. I don't see him taking a personal shot like that. So my guess would be that was either given to him. Look at the end tail in the VCW there. All these iconic names in ECW are one by one leaving because we can't afford to stay. And in this business, especially with a promotion like ECW, it really boils down to what we're getting paid. If I can get more over there and want to work over there, that's my decision. I've been in the middle of that most of my career and always hated it. But it's a decision that has to be made. Mike was a very talented guy, very big guy. I just think that, my guess, and it's all conjecture because he's gone, is that ECW would have been a much better fit for him with his abilities. And when we see him go to WCW and become this leisure suit guy, it just wasn't him, right? I mean, when I listen to music, I can listen to a song and think that's going to be a hit or it's not going to be a hit. And I'm usually right on it. You have an ear for it, having been a musician at one point. Same thing here. I can look at a character and go, that's got legs or it doesn't have. And I never saw the legs to the WCW character that was given to him. My guess would be that was probably something either given by Paul or if it was from Joey, that there would have been some backstory to that. I don't think what Joey would, I can't ever imagine, would it just be in a commentary to say, I'm going to take a shot at this guy for no reason. But I've never heard what that is.
With the WCW run of Mike Awesome, as you said, he's huge, really talented, high flyer, 6'6", can do things most people of any size can't do. There's the next candidate for the fat chick thriller. Why did he give such? I just don't understand why they saw nothing in him. Was he purely hired to stick it to ECW?
Yeah, no. I mean, again, that's a question I always ask. Again, when you look at somebody, Bobby Roode, in my experience, when I was in TNA, when I saw him leave Team Canada, I would catch myself magnetized to watching. Right, you can teach the moves, you can't teach the aura. Right, you either have that or you don't have it. And Bobby had it. He would know when to speed up, when to slow down, when to just glare at the audience, and it just breathed life. It just grabbed you. It's astounding to me that today in 2022, looking back over that last 15 years, that Bobby Roode wasn't a major world champion somewhere because he had all the body, the gifts, the love of the business, all of that. Same thing with Dolph Ziggler, same thing with Mike Awesome. If you go down through wrestling history, there's so many of these guys that have so much talent. And then they get put in a leisure suit or, some gimmick that's off a Dean character, whatever. A lot of times you think, maybe it just happened. And then, as you get older, I think you start to look at it and go, it looks a lot by design because, he looks silly. This guy that can do all this stuff just looks silly standing there. They're like, okay, so what's this guy going to do next? What's his next angle? What's his next? It's pratfall. It's a pie in the face. It's not, boom, that fist that a champion would give. So, my guess would be that was, something done by WCW for whatever reason. But yeah, Mike was a talented guy and a good guy, good friend. I was shocked when I heard what happened at the end with him. Just like, so many people in our business that decided to take that route. It breaks my heart that these people didn't think they had somebody they could reach out to and talk to, because, in our business, there's always guys you don't get along with, but there's also a lot of guys you make really, really good friendships with. And, it's sad. Like one of those things that just breaks your heart, that it's so senseless. And that they, what must have been going through their head as they were led up to that point. Heartbreaking. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not connected, but it's sort of a weirder question that Tommy Dreamer admitted to some years ago. Did you ever hear the comment that Tommy Dreamer made years after the fact that when ECW closed down, he planned to go to WrestleMania 17 and shoot Paul Heyman?
No, I never heard that. Boy, when you start putting your mind frame back into that period, I've always said that the one thing that none of us deserved there was to get screwed. We had all given it all. I mean, I don't recall seeing anybody in ECW go out and half-ass it or not leave it all in the ring. That was, I think, one of our secret ingredients, was that we did have such a hard-working crew. At the end, when it went to bankruptcy, it was just sort of like the final indignity. That when it went to bankruptcy, the remaining assets, all of the remaining assets, like 4-point-something million, went to the video game company that had already made a king's ransom in profits. And the guys that, all of us in the dressing room, that had sacrificed that money, not voluntarily, that it just seemed like a final indignity that we had all gone in there and worked so hard and so diligently. And so, I mean, going to that building at 1:00 in the afternoon, it was quite common to still be working at 6 a.m. the next morning on promos or whatever else in the back. The crew was completely all in, and all supported everything. We all firmly believed in it. So somebody like Tommy, that I had seen go from this, young, bright-eyed kid, no wrinkles, good body, the silly suspenders and everything, and just wanting to learn the business, get to that point. Like when I hear you say that, it's that was the anger that we're all feeling, right? That I always figured that New Jack would stab him someplace or something, one of those crazy things. Because, again, a lot of those guys, pretty much everybody that was anybody in that dressing room got really, really taken in that end. And it's, again, like I've reached the age where I just put that stuff behind me, but it is sort of a slap in the face to see that he's gone on and made a pretty good living for himself, and taking care of himself, at the same time that, there's still a whole lot of money owed to people. And, and in this business, we all cross paths, right? You're going to be in a dressing room someplace, in an airport someplace. I would feel like an ass running into people that I had done that to. I just look those people in the eye. So, it's the real alarm to me came when I was doing the commentary there towards the end. And Joey and I were in the studio waiting to do our own cameras. And Paul was doing one of his 96-hour editing issues. And the phone rang. Paul reached up at the speaker and said, "Paul Heyman." And I hear Vince McMahon's voice go, "Paul." And Paul about breaks his back trying to get up and get that phone and get out the door. And I look at Joey and Ron and Charlie and said, "What the fuck's he doing calling our studio?" Well, I've been in the business long enough that you can figure this out pretty quickly. And, Paul tried to give me some story that he called him for an input on an angle or something. I'm like, Vince McMahon called you for an input on an angle, not Pat Patterson or somebody else. And I told him then, I said, "Look, I don't know what you're doing with this guy." I said, "But I tell you what's going to happen. He will kiss you. He'll kiss your ring. He'll kiss your ass, whatever he has to, until he doesn't. And when he doesn't, he'll stab you right in the back." That's exactly what he did. So, Paul got his, I guess, in a way, not to our satisfaction, for obvious reasons, but
he remains unshot as of this day.
Yes.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Right, okay then. So, let me have a look. 6 and a bit minutes we've got left. I've devised a little personality test. Just some questions about your days in the business. Fairly random, but I'm going to throw them at you thick and fast. And the first one is the move you hated taking more than any other.
ECW to WWF.
No, I'm sorry. The professional wrestling move, like
the wrestling move. Yeah. The move I hated more than any other. It's when you're laying on a table or on the mat and you see somebody climb to the top rope and jump 10 feet into the air. It takes a certain kind of stupid to like just lay there and wait for it. And there's that split second where you're thinking, half an inch off, you're going to splat my head. But then in time, guys like Sabu, 100% trust completely. And once you get to that comfort zone, but there's a period of sort of learning how to just lay there and wait for it. And that was early on in ECW. There are other guys that will say they can do, they've never done it. And I'm like, yeah, we're not trying that. The guys you can trust, there's guys that you can't trust. And so that for me, I think was like the most. The other, as far as a specific move, I was never a fan of the German, taking the German, right? Because a lot of guys, every one of us is different, and every one of us executes differently. And early on in my career in UWF, we were in Baton Rouge at the Centroplex. I'm wrestling Rick Steiner, and he calls the move and goes behind me. Well, my inclination was to jump as hard as I can, throw myself into it, right? Well, he was just so cock strong that me throwing my momentum, it was like literally right over him, like a pencil, like slammed on my head into the mat. And for about 30 seconds, I thought I was paralyzed. And for like a month after, my fingers and toes were numb. And it just was like a little bit gun shy, So I always tell people I don't do any kind of backward move like that.
The rest of these questions may have to be with time constraints, 1 or 2 words now. Favorite drink on the road?
Used to be dark beer. Went from that to now that I'm watching my figure more, hard seltzers. You can drink 10 of them and not get drunk or whatever. I don't like getting drunk or tipsy, so I rarely drink more than 2 or 3.
But I hate hard seltzer. Favorite year in the business?
Favorite year would be 1993 to roughly 2000. The ECW years were just amazing. For a guy like me that saw all the shit I had seen in the other territories, to see a crew so devoted, a fan base insane. That working in that little shitty building was unbelievably crazy. Just a mile above everything else.
Best payoff for a single event?
Best payoff would have been, for me, would have been the 1997 November to Remember. We got ripped. Me and Scott both promised the same thing. Both of us got ripped off about half, but it was still by far the single most payoff I'd gotten for a single shot.
Favorite or easiest type of stipulation match to work?
Cage matches are a breeze. Typically, gimmick matches can be easy. If you're working with somebody that's dangerous, it can cause problems. But bull rope matches always were hard for me because there's always this chain or something in between you that you're having to step over and getting tangled up in. But the battle royals, as the fans know, is just a throwaway. And the cage matches are pretty straightforward and simple. So those to me were always the easiest.
Now, I don't know if you want to give away the secret, but a preferred place to hide a blade?
For me, it was always on my wrist. I had tried the finger like Flair does, and every time it would end up breaking through and I'd start bleeding, which is what happened on the Hollywood Blonde Shane Douglas Ricky Steamboat match in Milwaukee that was on Clash of Champions. Bill had taken me down to the bowels of the building. This is at a time when WCW would fire you for blading, and asked if I thought I could do it, and we kicked it around and thought I could do it. Well, if you watch early in that, I'm wearing white tights, and I'm on the apron. I feel something wet, and I look down. And sure enough, it had broken through and I'm bleeding. So every time somebody walked by me, I'd wipe my hand on the referee, on the rope, whatever. So I never did it again after that. But mine was always here to there, and done a specific way because the fans had become smarter by the 90s. You couldn't just generally do what the guys in the 70s and 80s before you had done. So especially now with technology, even back then we had, you could stop something and look and, really find it. So I would always typically do mine in a series of motions, right? So there'd be a bump as I'm coming up, get ready to hit me with something. But once I stand up, I've already gotten it. So if you delay at all, it's got to be right up and bam. And then you never put your hands near your face and you would see it come. I learned that from Bruno. I saw a clip from Bruno, no sound. It was an old Super 8 that had been converted. He's wrestling Ivan Koloff. His head is laying on the bottom turnbuckle. Koloff is loading the boot up and running and kicking him in the face, and then goes back and does it again and again. And each time he gets kicked, there's a trickle of blood. And the second, 2 trickles of blood, then 3. And I know what he's doing. I can't see it. So I finally, and because it was old Super 8 converted, it was not real good, like freeze frame. Sometimes it was blurry or whatever. But I finally saw what he was doing. Each time Ivan's boot would come in, Bruno would put his hands up like he was trying to block it and then come back. There was, for a split second, I'm like, is he having it on his boot? That'd be too dangerous. And then I caught it. He's got it. And each time trying to block it, it looks normal, natural. He's getting it one at a time. So again, the masters that do that stuff, like just Maestro.
I'll tell you what, that's the exact 2 hours. Is Chris there beckoning you to?
No, yeah, go and we'll slide one or two.
I'll tell you, I'll slide one. Okay, I'll slide 1 or 2 more until Chris comes dragged you out by the earlobe. Favorite airport if you have one.
The favorite
airport.
Airport, Pittsburgh.
Fine answer.
Because it's I'm coming. Pittsburgh, the TSA in Pittsburgh, best in the country. They know me there. It's always an easy jaunt getting through, and it's a smaller airport, so easy to get through.
Anytime you no-showed a show?
Not intentionally. Or either like Chris had me booked somewhere and I didn't know it, or vice versa. And there was one time in WCW where my flight had gotten screwed up and I didn't make the shot. Never intentionally, never would take somebody's money and skip out.
And the last one before Chris gets you is first time you saw a wrestler carry a gun.
Oh, Bill Watts.
Really?
I guess would have been. I'm sure there were a lot of guys carrying that I was unaware of at that time. But to actually like walk into the office and see a gun laying there, young kid like him, what do you need a gun for in a wrestling office, right? Who doesn't need a gun in a wrestling office now? But it's crazy.
It's a crazy business, and this brings us to the end of our interview. And thank you so much for spending so much time with me, as you always do. And Twitter, any other things you want to get out there before we go?
Yeah, I'm starting to get back on Twitter. I'm giving it the slow pause as Elon Musk is taking over to see what it does or does not become. I'm still locked out of my Facebook account. I am being pushed heavily to join like Truth Social, and my sons are always telling about TikTok. I don't have the time to do the Twitter stuff really, so. But in the near future, we'll try to be, getting on some more of the stuff now that it seems, hopefully, that it's loosening back up some of this stuff. But also, I do want to hit on YouTube. If everybody go take a look at Franchise's Friends, we've got a new format for a show where we have basically sort of a sit down of me and my buddies that I've known forever and talking about topics of the day. And they're very brief, very quick, 7-8 minute clips, sometimes 9-10 minutes, but quick clips that you can get through and hear what the Queen of Extreme Francine thinks, or Luke, Bushwhacker Luke thinks of something, or the Nasty Boys, and we have others in the can to come back. I do want the people to go there, subscribe, and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, but send in information. We want to hear what the fans want to see. What are the questions the fans want to ask? What wrestler do they want asked of? That'd be at Franchise's Friends on YouTube. We'd love to hear anybody's feedback.
There we go. So there's a ton of links. All the links will be in the description. But for now, thank you very much, Shane, for spending time with me as always. We'll be doing this again sooner rather than later. And we'll catch you again next time we do an interview.
Yeah. Cheers and Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everybody.